Welcome to another episode of the Venari Podcast. It's a pleasure to introduce Ellie Kaplan, CEO and co-founder of NeuroTrack. Welcome to the podcast, Ellie. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you as well, Christian. Thank you.
Before we, kind of dive in, really, I'd love to know a little bit more, Ellie, kind of about, your background. Maybe give us a bit of, context about, your early life pre-founding NeuroTrack.
Depends on how early you want to go, but I went into college thinking I was going to be a doctor, like just about everybody else in my family. Got there, was taking all the necessary pre-med classes, and then took my first political science class and fell in love and decided that I would finish out my pre-med classes, but also do politics. And my thesis advisor in college was Bill Clinton's chief foreign policy advisor, and I had worked with him on the campaign. And so when he was put in place as the national security advisor during the first Clinton administration, he brought me with him. Following that, I went into private equity, worked at AIG for a bit, then took a position at the UN, mainly because, as some know, the UN actually has a bit of a quota system when it comes to hiring people. And so very few Americans can get jobs there. And so I saw it as that one rare experience before I was going to, in theory, go back to medical school. And so did that for about 2.5 years, loved it, traveled all over the world, and then went to business school, did my MBA at Harvard. And it was when I was in business school that my grandfather first started to show signs of Alzheimer's disease. And as a family that understood healthcare and understood medicine, however, not neurology, I think we had this naive view that this is just another disease that people encounter, and we'll get a diagnosis and we'll get a treatment plan, and we'll be fine. And that obviously was not the case then. But when my grandmother on my other side of my family also started to show signs of Alzheimer's disease, and we went back through the process again about 5 years later, and really nothing had changed, it struck me as a huge problem and a huge opportunity. It struck me that given the need, there was a huge potential market. And so that's when I started NeuroTrack. And really the goal, and this is the part that sort of goes back to my early childhood, when my father was a pediatrician in the Indian Health Service, was this very basic understanding, literal experience of seeing how access to healthcare or lack of access to healthcare can impact people's lives. And so, my firsthand experience with Alzheimer's and this view that if only more people had access to testing, that would help spur a lot of the other changes that needed to happen in order to develop therapeutics and really get large data sets to be able to analyze and do a better job of kind of phenotyping the disease, that was an important first step. And that's really what led to the founding of the company.
Absolutely. And so tell us, what NeuroTrack does.
So NeuroTrack is a digital health company that has developed digital products to screen, diagnose, and manage cognitive decline, beginning with mild cognitive impairment all the way through Alzheimer's disease. Our products are it's software. So we sell into large provider organizations and health systems in order to help primary care doctors do a more efficient and effective job of screening their populations for cognitive decline. And it is, I started this company a number of years ago, and when I first started it, there were hundreds of what they call disease-modifying drugs in the pipeline for Alzheimer's disease. And unfortunately, every single one of those drugs failed. But there was an awareness that both on the part of my investors, who obviously play an important and critical role in all of this, but in sort of the market in general, that this was coming, we just didn't know when. And so, we're now in this place where CMS, Medicare, has said every senior over the age of 65 must get a cognitive screen as part of their annual physical. And primary care doctors are, recognizing they need to be doing this, but they just don't know how, given the burdens that or the time burdens in particular, that they're under in terms of squeezing in so many different things. And so we help them do that in a really efficient and effective way.
Fantastic. And do you think, given the fact that, like, you've been going, like you say, a number of years kind of prior to this, do you think that that's been a huge advantage for you guys in terms of, building NeuroTrack?
Absolutely. I mean, if you can survive from a financial perspective, it is valuable, particularly in a space like Alzheimer's disease, where, there's still so much that we don't know, and on the scientific and medical side. And then on the patient side, so much stigma and fear around the disease. And so, what that time has really allowed us to do is to build out our science. It's both an opportunity and a challenge of, waiting for a market to show up. But, we took the view that it's an opportunity, and in particular, because we have investors who really believe in what we're doing and the approach that we've taken. And so as a result, we have really deeply clinically and scientifically validated products. So we have now 26 peer-reviewed publications. We're FDA Class 2 medical device registered. We have a deep patent portfolio. We have 300,000 real-world bits of evidence just in one particular data set. And so, that makes it possible for us to go into a health system and say, we're not another fly-by-night digital health company. We have been around working in the space, really understanding, how to do this. And that is very important because, as I mentioned, we're still at the very beginning stages of starting to build in these new care pathways and patient journeys. And so they can look to us as the experts, and we can help educate them with a very high degree of credibility and confidence.
No, I can imagine. And no doubt you probably had to pivot a number of times as well, kind of over the years as to your kind of, your value offering. But I mean, is the space,
for sure.
And maybe elaborate a little bit on that, Ellie. I mean, how have you had to kind of pivot around?
Early days, as I mentioned, we work with big drug companies to help them better identify candidates for clinical trials. Then we started working in Japan, where Japan has the largest aging population in the world. They're very forward thinking about the role of diagnosis and care management of the disease, recognizing that it's not just a health and social issue, it's an economic issue. And so we've worked for, I don't know, the last 4 or 5 years or so in Japan with large insurance companies there, rolling out our products. We've also worked in the US with long-term care insurance. And so, we've honed our commercial chops along the way as well. And now that we have this exciting market where we knew we would always end up, it just was a matter of time.
It's a matter of time, really,
that we could go after it.
Moving forward, I mean, you're obviously in a kind of a great position. I understand that you're kind of in the process of raising funds. Where do you see NeuroTrack in the next kind of couple of years? Like, what's the next phase for you guys?
I mean, the next phase is really continuing to grow and implement in clinical settings. And so, we've now rolled out with many, but, there are lots of primary care doctors in this country. And they, for those who see patients over the age of 65, they need our tool. I mean, the feedback that we get from physicians, from medical assistants, who are the ones who actually do a lot of the testing, interacting with the patients, is incredibly positive. And the feedback that we get from patients who say, I've been so nervous about my memory, and, getting a good score really put me at ease. And now I understand what's going on. Or frankly, the opposite, which is like, I've been so worried about my memory, or I've been so worried about my parents' memory. Understanding where they really are and now what we need to do has been incredibly helpful. And there are a couple of other issues that are related to that. One is that we have a scarcity of neurologists in this country. I mean, and it's not unique to the US, it is everywhere. You know, historically, what has happened is that because primary care didn't have the tools at their fingertips to be able to do this kind of first line testing, everyone who had an issue would get referred into neurology. And so, you know, that has accounted for a lot of the backlog. And now what the hope is that we can make these systems much more operationally efficient and get the right patients to the neurologist, which shortens wait times. It means that those who really are candidates for some of these new drugs that are coming on the market are getting access to them. So it's all a big win. It's going to take some time to get there, but it's a massive win for everybody.
Final question really from my side. Obviously, it's been great to talk about NeuroTrack and obviously your story, but do you have any tips maybe for, you know, future CEOs or founders that you can kind of share?
Yes. Penny. You know, I think the first is do not give up. You know, I think everyone talks about the role of grit and perseverance and, but it's a real thing. And I think, you know, those of us who are in mission-oriented companies or who started companies out of personal reasons have a little bit of an advantage because, you know, it's easier
that determination
to hold
is
on
there.
to that. Yeah, but you know, we're not going to fail. Like there's not a day that it may sometimes require a little creative thinking or talking to others about how we're going to get there. But, you know, from day one, I have known and believed and had the conviction that the market would get here. That doesn't mean that there weren't some really dark days along the way. And there weren't times when I was less confident. But I think you just have to have this mantra that you're not going to give up. You can't stop. And I think part of being able to do that is really in building community. Find people who are going to be helpers. You know, Mr. Rogers, the famous children's TV show host here from a long time ago, had this line where, you know, he would say to kids, like, if you're ever scared, look for the helpers. It's the same thing is true for starting a company. Build your community of people who have your back and who will help make introductions, who will take a call when you're worried about something, who will work through a business model with you, who will, you know, help you from a hiring or you name it perspective. That is critical. And then I think the third thing, and it relates to both of those, is to recognize that it's a marathon and not a sprint. You know, even when you look at super successful tech companies, you know, a lot of people don't remember the history. And so recognizing that things take time, and particularly in healthcare, things take a really long time. And preparing yourself from kind of a lifestyle work balance perspective. There's always urgency when you are, you know, working in a startup or starting a company. But if you work 24/7 for 10 years, you know, that's just not sustainable. And so really figuring out, particularly now where, you know, there's just, the world is a scary place and people are experiencing all kinds of things outside of their work life. Figuring out how to take care of yourself through all of that is key. And so I think those would be my top three on the advice side.
No, great advice, and I appreciate that, and obviously, you know, sharing your story and you know, learning more about NeuroTrack, and you know, wish you obviously all the best success, and you know, thanks again, Ellie.
Thank you. This was great, and thanks for getting our message out and taking the time. It's terrific, and I really appreciate it.
No problem.